the Honorable, the Vice President.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the Supreme Being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us who are members of this Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations so that setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Announcements by the Vice President.
Honorable Senators, I wish to advise that the President of the Senate, Senator the Honorable Christine Kangaloo, is out of the country. Honorable Senators, I have received the following correspondence from Her Excellency, the President Paula Mae Weeks, ORTT. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, by Her Excellency Paula Mae Weeks, ORTT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, to Mr. Hugh Ian Roach. Whereas, by the provisions of paragraph E of subsection 2 of section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the President, in exercise of the power vested in her, is empowered to declare the seat of a senator to be vacant. Now, therefore, I, Paula Mae Weeks, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by the said paragraph E of subsection 2 of section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby declare the seat of you, Hugh Ian Roach, to be vacant with effect from the 19th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 19th day of November 2018. To Mr. David Small, whereas by the provisions of paragraph E of subsection 2 of section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the President, in exercise of the power vested in her, is empowered to declare the seat of a senator to be vacant. Now, therefore, I, Paula Mae Weeks, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by the said paragraph E of subsection 2 of section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby declare the seat of you, David Small, to be vacant with effect from the 19th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 19th day of November 2018. To Dr. Torel Shriki-Soon, whereas by the provisions of paragraph E of subsection 2 of section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the President, in exercise of the power vested in her, is empowered to declare the seat of a senator to be vacant. Now, therefore, I, Paula Mae Weeks, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by the said paragraph E of subsection 2 of section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby declare the seat of you, Torel Shriki-Soon, to be vacant with effect from the 19th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 19th day of November 2018. To Ms. Melissa Ramkisoon, whereas by the provisions of paragraph E of subsection 2 of Section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the President, in exercise of the power vested in her, is empowered to declare the seat of a senator to be vacant. Now, therefore, I, Paula Mae Weeks, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by the said paragraph E of subsection 2 of Section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby declare the seat of you, Melissa Ramkisoon, to be vacant with effect from the 19th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 19th day of November 2018. To Mr. Stephen Crease, whereas by the provisions of paragraph E of subsection 2 of Section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the President, in exercise of the power vested in her, is empowered to declare the seat of a senator to be vacant. Now, therefore, I, Paula Mae Weeks, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by the said paragraph E of subsection 2 of Section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby declare the seat of you, Stephen Crease, to be vacant with effect from the 19th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 19th day of November 2018. To Ms. Jennifer Rafool, whereas by the provisions of paragraph E of subsection 2 of Section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the President, in exercise of the power vested in her, is empowered to declare the seat of a senator to be vacant. Now, therefore, I, Paula Mae Weeks, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by the said paragraph E of subsection 2 of Section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby declare the seat of you, Jennifer Rafool, to be vacant with effect from the 19th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 19th day of November 2018. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, appointment of a senator. By Her Excellency Paula Mae Weeks, ORTT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, to Mr. Anthony Vieira. In exercise of the power vested in me by paragraph C of subsection 2 of Section 40 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I, Paula Mae Weeks, President as aforesaid, do hereby appoint you, Anthony Vieira, a senator with effect from the 20th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 20th day of November 2018. To Ms. Amrita Dionarain, in exercise of the power vested in me by paragraph C of subsection 2 of Section 40 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I, Paula Mae Weeks, President as aforesaid, do hereby appoint you, Amrita Dionarain, a senator with effect from the 20th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 20th day of November 2018. To Ms. Sharice Sipasad, in exercise of the power vested in me by paragraph C of subsection 2 of Section 40 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I, Paula Mae Weeks, President as aforesaid, do hereby appoint you, Sharice Sipasad, a senator with effect from the 20th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 20th day of November 2018. To Mr. Diarup Timal, in exercise of the power vested in me by paragraph C of subsection 2 of Section 40 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I, Paula Mae Weeks, President as aforesaid, do hereby appoint you, Diarup Timal, a senator with effect from the 20th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 20th day of November 2018. To Mrs. Hazel Thompson IE, in exercise of the power vested in me by paragraph C of subsection 2 of Section 40 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, do hereby appoint you, Hazel Thompson Aye, a Senator with effect from 20th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President St. Anne's this 20th day of November 2018. To Dr. Maria Dillon Remy, in exercise of the power vested in me by paragraph C of subsection 2 of section 40 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, do hereby appoint you, Maria Dillon Remy, a Senator with effect from the 20th of November 2018, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President St. Anne's this 20th day of November 2018. Honorable Senators, Senators are required to take the oath.
I, Anthony Vieira, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
I, Amrita Devanarayan, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by the Bhagavad Gita that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
I, Sharice Sipasad, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
I, Deru Timal, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Bhagavad Gita that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
I, Hazel Thompson Ahi, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
I, Maria Dillon Remy, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
Honorable Senators, I'm currently awaiting one more instrument of appointment. When it arrives, I'll crave your indulgence to revert to this item on the order paper. Please be seated. Senators, I have received the following correspondence from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Appointment to Joint Select Committee. At a sitting held on Friday, November 2nd, 2018, the House of Representatives agreed to the following resolution. Resolved, that the House agree to the appointment of Mr. Rushton Paria in lieu of Mr. Barry Padarat on the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity. I request that the Senate be informed of this decision at the earliest convenience, please. Respectfully, Bridget Mary Anisette George, Speaker of the House.
Bills brought from the House of Representatives. The Miscellaneous Provisions, Heritage Petroleum, Paria Fuel Trading, and Guaracara Refining Vesting Bill 2018 in the name of the Minister of Finance.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, in accordance with Standing Order 62(1)B, I beg to move that the next stage of the bill be taken later in the sitting.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the next stage of the bill be taken later in the sitting. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The next stage of the bill will be taken later in the sitting.
Papers.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I have the honour to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in the name of the Minister of Finance. The annual audited financial statements of Taurus Services Limited for the financial year ended September 30, 2016. The annual report of the National Enterprise Limited for the year ended March 31, 2018. The annual audited financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Solid Waste Management Company Limited for the financial year ended September 30, 2016. The annual audited financial statements of the Palo Agricultural Enterprises Limited for the financial year ended September 30, 2017. The annual audited financial statements of the Exim Bank for the financial year ended December 31, 2017. The reports of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Racing Authority for the years ended July 31, 2009, and 2010. The audited financial statements of the National Quarries Company Limited for the financial year ended September 30, 2012. The special report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the audit of compliance with procurement practices for the Shore of Peace Stabilization Project of the Ministry of Works and Transport. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the statement of recovery of expenses of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries for the year ended December 31st, 2017. The reports of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Public Transport Service Corporation for the years ended September 30, 2009 and 2010. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the fourth report of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure, third session, 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the Trinidad and Tobago Inter-Island Ferry Service with specific focus on the procurement and maintenance of ferries. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the third report of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs, third session, 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into commercial banking fees in Trinidad and Tobago. The policy-based loan agreement between the Corporación Andina de Fomento and the government of Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in the amount of US $300 million executed on July 21st, 2017. The policy-based loan agreement between the Corporación Andina de Fomento and the government of Trinidad and Tobago in the amount of US $180 million and executed on April 23rd, 2018. The policy-based loan agreement between the Corporación Andina de Fomento and the government of Trinidad and Tobago in the amount of US $120 million executed on August 29, 2018. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the National Agricultural Marketing and Development Corporation for the year ended September 30, 2011. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the San Fernando City Corporation for the year ended September 30, 2006. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Tuna Puna Piarco Regional Corporation for the year ended September 30, 2008. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the consolidated financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Unit Trust Corporation for the year ended September 31st, 2017. The annual audited financial statements of Caroni 1975 Limited for the financial year ended June 30, 2018. The annual audited financial statements of the Portfolio Credit Management Limited for the financial year ended December 31st, 2017. The annual administrative report of the Trinidad and Tobago Tourism Business Development Company Limited for the year ended December 31st, 2016. The audited financial statements of the CLICO Investment Fund for the financial years ended December 31st, 2016 and 2017. The second report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the San Juan Laventil Regional Corporation for the year ended September 30, 2018. And finally, Mr. Vice President, the reports of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the San Juan Laventil Regional Corporation for the years ended September 30, 2009 and 2010. Thank you.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in the name of the Minister of Public Utilities. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Public Utilities to the 15th report of the Public Accounts Committee, 3rd session, 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the audited financial statements of the Water and Sewage Authority for fiscal year 2008 to 2013. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Public Utilities to the 16th report of the Public Accounts Committee, 3rd session, 2017-2018, 11 Parliament, on the examination of the audited financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission for the financial year 2012 to 2015.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed in the order paper in my name. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Works and Transport to the 18th report of the Public Accounts Committee, 3rd session, 2017-2018, 11 Parliament, on the examination of the report of the audited financial statements of the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for financial year 2008 to 2012. Thank you.
Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Vice President. I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. The International Labour Organization Protocol of 2014 to the Forced Labour Convention 1930, adopted at the 103rd session of the International Labour Conference of the ILO, held in Geneva, Switzerland on June 11, 2014. The International Labour Organization recommendation on supplementary measures for the effective suppression of forced labour, number 203, adopted at the 103rd session of the International Labour Conference of the ILO, held in Geneva, Switzerland, on June 11, 2014. The International Labour Organization recommendation concerning the transition from the informal to the formal economy, number 204, adopted at the 104th session of the International Labour Conference of the ILO, held in Geneva, Switzerland, on June 12, 2015. And finally, the International Labour Organization recommendation concerning employment and decent work for peace and resilience, number 205, adopted at the 106th session of the International Labour Conference of the ILO, held in Geneva, Switzerland, on June 16, 2017. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper as listed on the order paper in my name. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Trade and Industry to the 17th report of the Public Accounts Committee, 3rd session, 2016-2017, 11th Parliament on the examination of the audited financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards for the financial years 2009 to 2013. Thank you.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper and supplemental order paper in the name of the Minister of National Security, the Attorney General, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Health, the Minister of Public Administration, the Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts, the Minister of Planning and Development, the Prime Minister, and the Vice President. The annual report of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board for the period 2014 to 2015. The annual report of the operations of the Interceptions of Communication Act, Chapter 1508, for the period on January to December 2016. The response of the Police Complaints Authority to the 9th report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11 Parliament, on an inquiry into the treatment of detainees and conditions at holding cells in Trinidad and Tobago Police Station. The annual report of the Legal Aid and Advisory Authority for fiscal year 2013-2014. The administrative report of the National Energy Skills Center for fiscal year 2014-2015. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Health to the 5th report of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11 Parliament, on an inquiry into the adverse health effects of fireworks. The ministerial response of the Service Commissions Department to the 11th report of the Public Accounts Committee, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11 Parliament, on the examination of the audited financial statements of the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2008 to 2012. The draft national policy on sustainable community development for Trinidad and Tobago. the annual administrative report of the former Ministry of Arts and Multiculturalism for the financial year 2011-2012, the draft National Environmental Policy 2018, the ministerial response to the Office of the Prime Minister to the 8th report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity, 3rd session, 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on an examination to the perceived inequity faced by single fathers in Trinidad and Tobago, with specific focus on custody matters, policies, and access to programs and services. And finally, Mr. Vice President, the annual administrative report of the Statutory Authority Service Commission for the fiscal year ended September 2017.
Reports from committees.
Senator Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to present the following reports as listed on the order paper in my name. The interim report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, 3rd session, 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on the examination into the processing of payment of pension and gratuity to retired public officers and contracted employees. And 2, Roman 2, the 11th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, 3rd session, 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the administration and expenditure of the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications.
Senator the Honorable Allyson West.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to present the following report as listed on the supplemental order paper in my name. The 6th report of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, 4th session, 2018 to 2019, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into mental health and wellness services and facilities in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Urgent questions.
Senator Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. To the Honorable Minister of Works and Transport, having regard to the recent theft of a PTSC bus, what measures are in place to ensure that PTSC's vehicles are properly secured?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, PTSC is currently conducting their investigation into yesterday's breach to identify any gap in their standard operating procedures and will take the immediate and appropriate action as required to mitigate against any further breaches. I thank you.
Senator Mark, supplemental.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, through you, can the Honorable Minister indicate whether security measures were in place at the PTSC compound in Chagonas during the theft of this PTSC bus?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Mr. Vice President, PTSC has and continues to protect all its assets with security at all our depots to ensure that the safety and security of these assets. So yes, there was security in place at the time.
Senator Mark, second supplemental.
Yeah, Mr. Vice President, as the Honorable Minister is aware, Allied Security Services, which receives $1 million a month from the PTSC and taxpayers, is one of the security agencies with responsibility for protecting the property of PTSC. Could the Honorable Minister indicate whether Allied Security Services was on the compound of the Chaguanas terminal when this theft occurred. Could you indicate to us, Mr. Honorable Minister?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. As I said, PTSC is currently conducting the investigation, which they will submit to the Ministry of Works and Transport. The Minister have requested a full investigation. At this point in time, I have no knowledge as to which security firm would have been contracted to serve on the compound. PTSC has several contractors, security contractors, on its many compounds. So at this point in time, Senator Mark may have a little more information than me as to which security firm would have been on the compound.
Senator Mark, next question.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. To the Honorable, yet again, the Honorable Minister of Works and Transport. You're on the line this afternoon. Mr. Vice President, through you, what immediate relief will be provided to persons who suffered losses and/or injuries as a result of the theft of the PTSC bus?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you again, Mr. Vice President. The corporation is awaiting advice on the coverage from its insured with which grant for the damage caused by the individual who obtained unauthorized access to one of its buses.
Senator Mark, for supplemental.
Yes, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, could the Honorable Minister indicate to the Senate how many citizens were or suffered injuries or were harmed as a result of this unfortunate development involving this PTSC bus?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Mr. Vice President, again, the ministry is awaiting the full report from the Ministry from the PTSC, and in that report, we will have details of exactly what happened, how many people were injured, and the way forward. But until then, as Minister of Works and Transport, I will not want to preempt the information on the report. Thank you.
Senator Mark, second.
Vice President, given the fact that the Minister always likes to be present when activities take place, can the Minister indicate whether he has taken, as the Minister with responsibility for the PTSC, any direct interest in visiting those areas where the bus apparently was involved in this accident and people were affected? Have you taken any decision to visit directly those families in the Chaguanas area?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, as Minister of Works and Transport, sometimes you have to respect the lines that you can cross. This matter is a police matter at this point in time. The police have been on the scene, and as Minister of Works and Transport, I wrote to the PTSC requesting a full investigation. Once that investigation comes to hand, then the ministry will look at the way forward. Thank you.
Senator Mark, next question.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. To my dear friend, leader of government business on his way out, to the Honorable Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, in light of reports that the Petroleum employee pension plan will run a $2.73 billion deficit if wound up, can the minister indicate what is being done to address this issue?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, the Petroleum's Employees Pension Plan, PEPP for short, being fully funded was only the case when Petroleum and PEPP were ongoing entities. The restructuring of PEPP and the termination of all employees changes everything in that benefit payments are accelerated significantly by the early retirement of all qualifying members. It is not possible to wind up the PEPP and secure benefits by buying annuities as suggested by Republic Bank, because the insurance market has nowhere near sufficient capacity. The $2.7 billion deficit quoted by Republic Bank was predicated on annuity buyout taking place, and this is not relevant. There is thus no alternative other than PPP being run off as a closed fund, meeting benefit payments from its assets when they fall due. Nearly 1,300 members of the plan, aged 50 and over, are expected to retire on the 1st of December 2018 with a lump sum payment of $1 billion. I am pleased to announce that PPP has comfortably enough assets to cover these payments. The actuaries' long-term analysis indicate that PPP may, and the key word here is may run out of funds based on its investments to meet benefit payments well into the 2040s, and thus any additional funding may be required if PPP is not able to meet these benefit entitlements in the 40s. The sponsor of the plan is committed to ensuring that the plan's obligations are fully met in the future.
Senator Mark, for supplemental.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Can the Honourable Minister indicate whether there's any intention on the part of Petroleum board and management to change the composition and functions of the current PEPP, that is the Petroleum Employees Pension Plan? Is the Minister aware that there are moves by Mr. Wilfred?
You asked the question already.
Okay.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
I know of no such plans, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Mark, second
Then
supplementary.
can the Honourable Minister indicate what steps are being taken by the government to meet and ensure that there is no deficit in the future, as outlined by the Honourable Minister, in this pension plan, having regard, Mr. Vice President, to the fact that all the employees have been terminated? Could the Minister indicate to us what steps are being taken to address this emerging deficit?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Mr. Vice President, the opposition is always looking to make mischief. The plan is well funded. The plan can meet its obligations fully well into the 2040s. And that is based on actuarial projections. And the actuary says, based on what securities you have, how they perform over the long term, that those are gray areas. So the current prediction is that the fund will be able to fund all its obligations well into the 2040s. Beyond that, there may be a deficit, but it's too early in the game to speak that type of language. But as we speak, the workers are comfortable.
Questions on notice, questions for oral answer.
Senator Ramdeen. Leader of Government Business, yes.
Mr. Vice President, I am pleased to announce that the government will be answering all questions for oral answers. For written answers, we ask for a deferral for 2 weeks of questions number 2, 8, and 10.
Honourable Senators, the deferral requested is granted. Senator Ramdeen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Question number 1 to the Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, construction of the cricket stadium was completed in May 2017. The Urban Development Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago, UDCOT, was engaged by the Ministry of Sports and Youth Affairs to provide project management services for construction of the facilities and was subsequently engaged to operate and manage the facilities post-construction, a facility that was left idle by the UNC for 5 long years. Mr. Vice President, with regards to the specific question, the Urban Development Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago has advised that the total revenue earned from the Brian Lara Stadium over the period September 2015 to September 2018 is $4,637,000 $707,748.95.
Senator Ramdeen, first supplemental.
Mr. Vice President, thank you very much. Mr. Vice President, through you to the Honorable Minister, Leader of Government Business. When this administration decided to spend $110 million on this facility in fiscal 2016 and 2017, what was the projected revenue upon which that decision was taken to spend that $110 million on that facility?
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Vice President, facilities that is for the public use is not 100% based on income forecast. And furthermore, the UNC's estimate to complete that prior to their demitting officers was $350 million. We completed it for $110 million US. And it has been put to good use, and the country is enjoying the facilities, especially those in South and Central Trinidad.
Yeah,
Senator, any more supplementals? Oh, okay. Senator Ramdeen, question number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Question number 3 to the Minister of Finance.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, may I first take the liberty to thank the independent senators who just demitted office for their service. I've enjoyed working with them. I welcome the new members of the independent bench and look forward to working with them. And I would like to congratulate Senator Richards on his elevation. In response to the question, Mr. Vice President, over the period September 8, 2015 to September 30, 2018, the government commissioned legal services in the amount of $2,270,113.66 to secure a $15+ billion debt owed to the state by CL Financial Group of Companies. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Ramdeen, first supplemental.
Mr. Vice President, could the Honorable Minister of Finance indicate who were the attorneys for which this $2.2 million were paid for the recovery of these monies in relation to the CL Financial Group of Companies?
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Vice President, I do not have those details before me, but I can, if the senator wishes, provide those in writing subsequently.
Senator Ramdeen, second supplemental.
Mr. Vice President, to the Honorable Minister of Finance through you. The figure of $2.2+ million that the Minister has given as in regards to the legal fees in relation to this matter, does that include contentious and non-contentious fees that have been paid by the Ministry of Finance?
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Mr. Vice President, my information is that these cover the total fees paid.
Senator Ramdeen, next question.
Question number 4, Mr. Vice President, to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I know the Honorable Senator is a lawyer, but no legal fees were paid to Gaffney Klein and Associates for the report on the alleged discrepancies and oil receipts from private operators, and more particularly A&V Drilling Limited. Gaffney Klein and Associates is a petroleum engineering consultancy firm.
Senator Ramdeen, first supplemental.
Mr. Vice President, through you to the Minister, what were the fees paid by Petrotrin to Gaffney Klein and Associates in relation to the A&V oil and gas matter, Minister? Through you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Ramdeen, I think that's... All right, Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
If the goodly senator had asked that question, I would have obviously had the answer with me. He didn't, and I encourage him to so do.
Senator Ramdeen, any more supplementals on this? Senator Ramdeen, no more supplementals? Senator Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Question number 19 to the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Mr. President, in recognition of the increasing numbers of Venezuelans arriving in Trinidad and Tobago in a regular and irregular manner, the National Security Council established an interministerial team whose mandate is to present options for this country's response to the issue. The interministerial team's draft response of Trinidad and Tobago to the Venezuelan migrant issue is being reviewed. Additionally, Mr. President, the Ministry of National Security has been working with stakeholders, including international organizations, to assess the needs of the migrants with a view to determining sustainable solutions that may be considered. Mr. President, I wish to emphasize that any mass migration phenomenon requires a collaborative, methodical, and deliberative approach in view of the fact that there are a variety of economic, social, psychosocial, health, and security issues that must be taken into account. The government of Trinidad and Tobago is therefore working assiduously to ensure that any policy enacted takes due cognizance of these issues and is sustainable and impactful. Mr. President, I thank you.
Senator Richards, first supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Through you, Mr. Vice President. Minister, based on your response, has the team been able to ascertain a number of Venezuelan nationals who may be in Trinidad and Tobago at this time through this migration process?
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Mr. President, I'm unable to confirm any figure in a precise way.
Richards, second supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Minister, through you, Mr. Vice President, has the ministry and or the team been able to put any systems in place to ensure that these migrants who are already in Trinidad and Tobago are being cared for in a humane way? Because we've had reports that they are being exploited in some areas.
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Mr. President, ours is one that is governed by good neighborliness and the rule of law.
Senator Mark, third supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Can I ask the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, I beg your pardon. Could you share with this Honorable Senate the various options that the interministerial team examined on this whole question of mass migration into this country by Venezuelans and other nationals?
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Thank you once again, Mr. President. Such issues form part of the work of the Interministerial Committee, and as my response indicated, a review is taking place right now.
Senator Hussain, fourth and final supplemental.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I would just like to ask the Minister, is the government intending on incorporating the 1951 Convention on Refugees into domestic law?
I won't allow that question. Next question, Senator Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Question number 20 rather, to the Honorable Minister of Health.
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, and may I add my own personal congratulations to new members of the independent bench. The answer is as follows. During the period 2015 to 2018, there has been no significant increase in the number of patients being admitted to the psychiatric ward of the San Fernando General Hospital. Based on this utilization, there is no need for relocation.
Senator Mark.
Vice President, can the Minister share with the Senate what is the population involved as it relates to patients at the psychiatric ward at the San Fernando General Hospital?
Surely.
Minister of Health.
In anticipation of the supplemental, there has been a declining trend from 902 in 2015 to 859 in 2018, thus representing a decrease of 4.7%. Also, Mr. Vice President, in anticipation of the other supplemental that is to come, there was a psychiatric hospital tribunal site visit on Friday, 8th December 2017. Attendees were Dr. Roshan Parasram, Chief Medical Officer, Mrs. Maria Busby Earl Cuddle, Chief Magistrate, Dr. Varma Dial Singh, Secretary, Psychiatric Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and Dr. Sandra Reed, Deputy Dean, Clinical Services, UWI. Their report, based on their visit, showed absolutely no need for relocation. So I am at a loss to find out where Senator Mark got these reports that there's overcrowding and there's a need for relocation. Based on this report by an independent tribunal, based on the statistics I have given, showing a 4.7 decrease in the population, I am at a loss to understand where Senator Mark got his information from.
Senator Mark.
Given the fact that he's at a loss.
No, you.
No, you are lost, not me. You will lose St. Joseph.
Okay, Senator Mark. Okay, Senator Mark.
Come on, fight with us. Come.
Let me just reassure the population, nobody will be fighting anybody inside here. Senator Mark, continue with your supplemental.
If I'm coming to Tobago to you. Mr. Vice President, may I ask my honorable colleague whether he would be prepared to make available a copy to this honorable House of the report issued by the independent tribunal that you have just outlined?
Minister of Health.
Once I clear it with the Chief Medical Officer and the legal department, and they say, yes, I have absolutely no problem in doing so.
Senator Mark.
Then I also ask my honorable colleague, could you offer this Senate any specific time frame when you can report to us as to that clearance from that particular body?
Minister of Health.
As soon as I get the clearance from the Chief Medical Officer and the legal department, once they have said that I can release the report, I have absolutely no problem in doing that.
Senator Mark, next question.
We will not really leave you. You're on your way out, yeah, St. Joseph? Mr. Vice President, may I address you? Mr. Vice President, question number 21 to the Honorable Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, the services available to victims of natural or man-made disasters such as fire from the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services upon completion of needs assessment are as follows. Household items up to 10,000, clothing grant 1,000 per person so affected, school supplies 1,000 for a child attending secondary, 7 for a child attending primary, house repairs up to 20,000, house rental grants of 2,500 per month, emergency food support, counseling services provided by the National Family Services Division for the affected family. An application was made to the Paria local board by one Mr. Hamid Mohammed for a general assistance grant for disaster relief as a result of his family home being destroyed by fire on September 7, 2018. The application was related to the grants for replacement of household appliances and clothing. The invoice for household appliances was received on September 28, 2018, whilst the relevant fire report, which was dated October 1, 2018, was received thereafter. The application has been approved.
Senator Mark? No? Senator Mark. Next question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Question number 22 to the Honorable Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, there is no preferential sale of Petroleum crude oil. The majors, international traders, refiners, and integrated oil companies will be invited to participate in the purchase of Petroleum crude oil. The company with the most competitive bid will be awarded the cargo. The short-term marketing strategy of spot sales, which is spot market pricing, has been adopted in order to establish the market value of MOLO crude, as our crude is called, which is a medium to low octane crude. An invitation to bid was sent out to 27 companies, consisting of majors, traders, refiners, and integrated oil companies. The bids were received on a secure email address that provided a safe platform for the sale of the crude oil. The bids were assessed by an evaluation team comprising senior executives. The criteria for evaluation the bid included the ability of the buyer to lift the cargo, competitive commodity pricing, attractive commercial and payment terms. Mr. Vice President, I'm pleased to announce that to date, 3 spot sales have been awarded. 1 sale to Trafigura, which is one of the world's international traders. The other to ExxonMobil sales and supplies, and the third to Shell, each with the most competitive bid on the 3 occasions, thereby providing an indication of the market value of the much-aligned Petrotrin crude. Mr. Abdullah, Mr. Sipasad Bechan, they all say. I'm also pleased to announce that the price we got was above WTI, which is West Texas Intermediate, which is one of the benchmark crudes internationally. All 3 cargoes have been shipped. Bids have been invited for delivery of 2 cargoes in December. So the plan is working well.
Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, could the Honourable Minister indicate what was the price of the West Texas Intermediate crude that we were able to fetch?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
I said the price was WTI plus $2. You can check the reference price. That price is referenced every day on the international market.
No, I am asking a specific question, Mr. Vice President. The oil has been shipped. It has been sold. So I'm asking the Honourable Minister if you could share with us what was the actual price that we fetch for our oil, WTI plus 2. He must know what was the price, not to get me to go on the international scale.
Okay, Senator Mark, you're repeating your question, and the Honourable Minister has answered that question the first time you asked it. So only going to get it. Yes, we'll go to the third.
Mr. Vice President, can I ask the Honourable Minister, what was the total value of oil exported by Trinidad and Tobago in the period under review, as outlined by the Honourable Minister, the total shipment of oil that was purchased
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Mr. Vice President, I have said repeatedly in the Senate, the package size for the shipment of crude based on the tanker size is approximately 500,000 barrels. You take 500,000 barrels and multiply it by the reference price. We quoted some, in these trades, you don't quote specific price, you say WTI plus, because sometimes the trading it goes overnight and that sort of thing. But you have an approximate price as to exactly what you paid. The package size is 500,000 barrels. 3 shipments has gone, and the price we got is WTI reference on a particular day plus $2. Sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. And let me just say that that's supposed to be very good and palatable news to the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Senator Ramdeen.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I was wondering if, through you, I can ask the Honourable Minister to give us and inform the public who are the names of these senior executives that have the responsibility for assessing these bids on the international market and deciding who it is that will have the privilege of purchasing crude from Trinidad and Tobago.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
From 1 minute, you're saying the crude can't sell. The next minute, we say we sell it. The next minute, we say we sell it at a good price. We say we sell it higher than the nation expected.
Minister, 1 second. Please allow the minister to answer the question. You asked a question, and he's attempting to do so and answer the question as he deems fit. Minister?
Now you want to know who was the evaluation committee. I am the Minister of Energy, and I don't even know who the evaluation committee is, because I do not interfere at that level in the organization. That's Petrotrin business. They have a marketing arm, and they do that as a matter of course. It's not everything have corruption in it, you know. That under all year, it should be like that. Okay?
What's your point of order?
There's a way to do it, Senator.
There's absolutely no need to allow this particular part of the proceedings of today to fall into that level of dispute. A question is asked, a question can be answered as deemed fit by the person to whom it's asked, and then you can ask supplementary questions based on that answer. That is the procedure. The minister has answered this. You've finished answering the question, Minister, as posed. Continue.
And please note, the sales were not made to any fly-by-night entity. Trafigura is probably the largest trader in the Western Hemisphere. Shell is Shell.
Corruption.
And ExxonMobil is bigger than Shell. And these are the names of the top players in the world. So I don't know what is the concern of the opposition.
We always consider to remove
Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, may I ask a question? Can I ask the Honourable Minister if you can outline to the Senate the specific date, or dates, when the shipments of oil was sent and sold on the spot market, as he outlined? Could he give us
Minister of
specifics?
Energy and Energy Industries.
I don't have that information with me right now.
Introduction of bills as listed on the order paper. The Licensing Committee Validation Bill 2018 in the name of the Attorney General, and the Magistrates Protection Amendment Bill also in the name of the Attorney General. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the Senate and moved by a minister.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Vice President, I beg to move the following motion. Be it resolved that the Senate agree to the following appointment. On the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, Mr. Paul Richards in lieu of Dr. Daneshwar Mahabe.
Honourable members, the question is, be it resolved that this Senate agree to the following appointment. On the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, Mr. Paul Richards in lieu of Dr. Daneshwar Mahabir. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honourable members, permit me to, as indicated earlier, to revert to item 3 on the order paper in relation to the instrument of appointment. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, by Her Excellency Paula May Weeks, ORTT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, to Mr. Ndali Young. Whereas Senator the Honorable Christine Kangaloo is incapable of performing her duties as the President of the Senate by reason of her absence from Trinidad and Tobago, and the Vice President of the Senate is required to perform the duties of the President of the Senate. As a result, a vacancy has arisen in the Senate. Now, therefore, I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Ndali Young, to be temporarily a member of the Senate with effect from the 20th of November 2018 and continuing during the absence from Trinidad and Tobago of Senator the Honorable Christine Kangaloo, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 20th day of November 2018. Honorable Senators, Senators are required to take the oath.
I, Ndali Young, having been appointed a member of the Parliament, do solemnly affirm that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, and will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities of the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
Public business, government business, bill second reading.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Vest Certain Assets of Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited in Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, and the Guaracara Refining Company Limited to vest certain assets of Trinidad and Tobago Oil Company Limited and Trinidad and Tobago Petroleum Company Limited in the Guaracara Refining Company Limited, and to vest Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited in Heritage Petroleum Company Limited. We now read a second time. Mr. Vice President, the purpose of this bill is to effect the vesting of certain assets, undertakings, and obligations currently held by, as I indicated, Petrotrin. I will use their acronyms, Trintoc, Trintopec, and PSAEL, into three newly incorporated companies, namely Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, which I will henceforth refer to as Heritage, Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, and Guaracara Refining Company Limited. Mr. Vice President, let me first set the context in which the Petrotrin matter came to a head. In 2014, the country witnessed a deterioration of energy commodity prices, which resulted in significant economic upheaval. In fact, what occurred triggered an almost 75% decline in crude oil prices from a high of $108 US in 2014 to $26 per barrel in 2016. This led to a collapse of petroleum revenues, which peaked at almost $20 billion in 2014 and plummeted to less than $1 billion in 2016, aggravated by a simultaneous decline in production. While in 2014, oil revenues contributed almost 30% to our total revenue, by 2016, it was contributing 2.3%. The weakening economic framework caused GDP to plunge, and we witnessed spiraling deficits, which this government has brought under control, which was not an easy task. Madam President, in no uncertain terms, the fiscal space had eroded substantially, and this government was placed in a very precarious economic position. What this meant is that we now have to make tough economic decisions in the best interest of the nation, and we continue to do so. Let me now turn to the performance of the company, Petrotrin. Mr. Vice President, and I apologize, this Honorable Senate will recall that at the beginning of 2017, the Honorable Prime Minister alerted the country to Petrotrin's dire economic straits. Institutional assessments were undertaken by international and local consultants to ascertain the extent of the problem, with a view to finding a solution to the problem that was too large to ignore any further. Those assessments identified two major problems. One, the Petrotrin had become an oil company that had effectively stopped drilling for oil. And two, it was operating its refinery in a way that was costing the company and the country billions of dollars in losses with no end in sight. Mr. Vice President, Petrotrin's refinery engaged in a series of upgrades which have resulted in an indebtedness of $12 billion, of which $5.7 billion is due in August 2019. Moreover, the company's strategic projects, including the gasoline optimization program, the gas to liquids project, and the ultra-low sulfur diesel project, resulted in almost $19 billion in cost overruns. This was compounded by a total employee base in the vicinity of 5,000.
Just un momento. As much as you're moving the motion, and it's understandable that a context must be created in order to make this particular bill that's before us intelligible, I want to remind senators, especially those who want to contribute to this, that there is a motion forthcoming, private members, that is going to deal with a lot of the context in relation to what is happening with Petrotrin. So as much as you can create that context, in terms of having it form a major part of your contribution today, that would not be allowed, because it will be anticipating a private member's motion that's forthcoming. So you can sort of create your context quickly and then get into the actual bill, which deals with the vesting orders and transference of assets. Thank you.
Guidance, Mr. Vice President. So, as I said, the other problems briefly were the cost of the staffing at Petrotrin, which exceeded $2.2 billion a year, and the fact that with the low production rate of petroleum having stopped its exploration program, Petrotrin was forced to import 100,000 barrels of oil a day to keep the refinery going. This created a situation that led to a $3 million a day loss for Petrotrin, because it was importing oil, refining it inefficiently, and selling it largely at a loss. So this was essentially an unsustainable state of affairs, which had to be addressed. So what that resulted in, Mr. Vice President, was deficient working capital of $6.5 billion, a financial loss of $1 billion in refinery and marketing business unit, unpaid taxes and royalties of $3.5 billion, $5 billion in short-term loans, $7 billion required to upgrade the aging plant, employee cost of 50% of the operating cost. This government reviewed the reports of the consultants and determined that it would be irresponsible to continue operating the company in the manner in which it was operating. It would be a drain on the finances of the state, and a solution had to be found. So, the proposed solution, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, in light of these issues, a decision has been taken to close the refinery and export the crude oil produced by the company, rather than continue to refine the local oil and sell it at a loss. A decision has been taken to pursue the exploration and production activity of the company, which is where all of the consultants indicate there is the real possibility of generating a profit. So the intention is to heighten that activity, increase the production from where it is now at roughly $40,000 a barrel per day to at least 60,000 barrels a day. That is the objective. Decision number 3, to import the petroleum-based products that are required for the needs of the country and also to satisfy our regional markets. So those are essentially the decisions that led us to the bill that we have before us today. The products to be imported include motor gasoline, diesel, aviation fluid, liquefied petroleum gas, and other derived and refined products. And these will be imported in sufficient quantities and quality, and generally in a manner to satisfy our local and regional demands on a timely basis. We will cease to import 100,000 barrels of crude oil a day to refine at a loss, and instead import 25,000 barrels to satisfy our needs. and we will sell the crude oil that we produce, hopefully in increased quantities, to generate foreign exchange. This will shift us from a net consumer of foreign exchange to a net earner of foreign exchange, which, as we all know, given the country's current foreign exchange situation, is something that we desperately need to do. Mr. Vice President, Petrotrin's 3,400 permanent and 1,500 temporary and casual employees will be terminated and provided with attractive finance packages estimated to cost $2.6 billion. The new company is expected to become profitable, internationally competitive, and would seek to reverse the decline in land and marine production for crude oil. To facilitate this shift, 3 new companies were incorporated on October 5th, 2018, to manage these new businesses. Heritage Petroleum will manage exploration and production. That company will be located in Santa Flora and Point Fortin and will have responsibility for all exploration and production assets, including exploration and production contracts, with revenue generated through the sale of crude oil and crude storage. Fuel trading and product supply activities will be undertaken by Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, which is located at Pointe-a-Pierre. In addition to trading and product supply, Paria Fuel will be responsible for logistics, terminaling, and product handling, and is expected to work closely with Heritage Petroleum. The Guaracara Refining Company Limited will be responsible for preservation of the refinery assets, in addition to providing utility services to Paria Fuel and Petrotrin. Petrotrin itself, the company which the world is being told is closing down, Petrotrin will remain in existence and continue to operate. All of the issued and outstanding shares of Petrotrin, as well as the shares of Heritage Petroleum, Paria Fuel, and Guaracara Refining, have been transferred to a new holding company called Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Company Limited, or TPHL. Petrotrin will therefore be a member of a group of subsidiaries held by TPHL. This will allow Petrotrin to meet all its outstanding contractual liabilities unhindered and will circumvent the possibility of Petrotrin bondholders imposing a requirement that they must approve the new structure. Petrotrin will also continue to hold certain assets. In summary, therefore, the holding company, TPHL, will have as its subsidiaries Heritage Petroleum, Paria Fuel Trading, Guaracara Refining, and Petrotrin. TPL will hold the entire complement of shares in those subsidiaries, and the shares of TPHL in turn will be held by Corporation Sole. That is the new structure. Progress has been made to date by Petrotrin in refinancing the $850 million US bond due in August 2019. Petrotrin approached the financial markets in October 2018 for a firm or consortium to refinance its long-term bonds. Following careful assessments of proposals, it was decided that 2 of the consortiums would work together to execute what is essentially the financing of a combination of the Petrotrin exit cost as well as the 2 bonds, the bond due in 2019 and the other one that's due in 2022. The consortiums are made up of, on the one hand, Credit Suisse, Blade X, and First Citizens Bank, and on the other hand, Morgan Stanley and Answer Merchant Bank. Over the last few weeks, progress has been made with the refinancing, and the parties are working towards having the first tranche of the exit cost settled by November 30, 2018, and the bonds refinanced soon after, well in advance of the due dates of those bonds. Petrotrin has also been dealing with the rating agencies on the restructuring to ensure that the risk and debt profile are properly articulated and received in the market. Closure or mothballing of the refinery and cessation of the refinery activities. The last imported crude cargo was discharged on October 10th, 2018, and crude processing at the refinery ceased on October 19th, 2018. The last process unit was shut down on November 3rd, and refinery preservation and mothballing is in progress. The first cargo of crude oil was successfully exported on November 1st. Importation by Petrotrin of fuel. Through a competitive bidding process in which reputable international suppliers participated, Petrotrin has so far secured 4 cargoes of gasoline, jet fuel, and diesel, which have already been discharged at Pointe-à-Pierre during the period spanning end of October to early November. A total of 16 cargoes have been contracted that cover supply until early January. So what is the rationale for this vesting bill, Mr. Vice President? In order to ensure a smooth transition to full operation of the new companies by December 1, 2018, these companies must be vested with all necessary assets, undertakings, and obligations that will enable their seamless operation in accordance with their purpose. Madam President, Mr. Vice President, the assets currently held by Petrotrin include land, various contracts, licenses, leases, oil fields, gas pipelines, as well as the Pointe-à-Pierre refinery assets that together facilitate the business operations of the company. Consequently, the most efficient and cost-effective method for the transfer of the Petrotrin assets to the new companies is through the vesting bill that is before us today. Seeking to achieve a transfer of the specified assets by traditional conveyancing mechanisms would not only have been extremely costly and exceedingly complicated, but would have resulted in an inordinate delay in the startup of the new companies, which we cannot afford. Accordingly, transfer of all the land holdings, contractual obligations and liabilities, and business operations simultaneously to 3 separate entities would have necessitated a myriad of legal activities that in the current context are impractical. These include surveying individual parcels of land, preparing a detailed list of all chattels held, drafting and preparation of various title transfer documents, and assignment of transfer instruments, and compliance with existing contractual requirements for assignment, to name just a few. As such, Mr. Vice President, the only viable option available for the simultaneous transfer of all the assets, undertakings, and obligations required for the various entities is the vesting of such assets by an Act of Parliament. Mr. Vice President, members of the House may recall that vesting of assets by an Act of Parliament is the very method by which Petrotrin became seized and possessed of some of the property, assets, and rights it currently holds. Petrotrin was incorporated in 1993 to consolidate the interest of Trinidad and Tobago Oil Company Limited, Trintoc, and Trinidad and Tobago Petroleum Company Limited, Petrotrin. In order to simplify the merger of those interests, the assets of Trintoc and Trintopec were vested in Petrotrin through the enactment of the Petrotrin Vesting Act, Chapter 6207. Trintoc and Trintopec are wholly owned state companies incorporated in 1974 and 1985, respectively. In fact, Mr. Vice President, Trintoc was also vested with its assets by Act of Parliament. The Trinidad and Tobago Oil Company Limited Vesting Act, Chapter 6205, enacted in 1961, provided for the vesting of all the assets, liabilities, and obligations of the Trinidad and Tobago Oil Company Limited, a company incorporated in the United Kingdom, in Trintoc, a company incorporated in Trinidad and Tobago. The appointed day of that vesting was January 1, 1981. Returning to the Petrotrin vesting, by Section 4 of the Act, the vesting of the undertakings allowed all contracts to which Trintoc and Trintopec were previously a party to be transferred to Petrotrin, and all of the collective agreements within the meaning of the Industrial Relations Act to be construed as if Petrotrin was a party, and further that Petrotrin would be deemed to be the successor of Trintoc and Trintopec. Section 4 also allowed for certain other rights, obligations, and liabilities of Trintoc and Trintopec to be transferred to Petrotrin. These included an approved fund, plan, or scheme under the Income Tax Act, all financial accounts, all power of attorney instruments, any negotiable instrument or order for payment of money, any security held for the payment or discharge of a debt, liability, or obligation, any judgment or award obtained by or against Trintoc and Trintopec, and all contracts of employment. In short, Mr. Vice President, the effect of the Petrotrin vesting order was to permit the business operations of both Trintoc and Trintopec to not only be merged, but continue uninterrupted under the management of Petrotrin. And this is what we are seeking to do with this new vesting order. The assets that are the subject of the Petrotrin Vesting Act are listed in Schedules 2, in two schedules of the Act. Against that backdrop, Mr. Vice President, I wish to advise that an order pursuant to Section 6 of the Petrotrin Vesting Act has been prepared. The order contains a complete listing of the non-core assets of Trintoc and Trintopec that are to be transferred to Petrotrin, and will be executed and come into effect simultaneously with the coming into operation of the instant vesting bill. That date is December 1, 2018. Trintoc and Trintopec possess certain additional assets that were not accounted for in the Petrotrin Vesting Act. It is proposed that those assets be transferred to Guaracara Refining, since they consist of reservoirs, a water treatment plant, and associated water infrastructure. Consequently, the vesting bill being debated today also provides for the transfer of those additional assets directly from Trintoc and Trintopec to Guaracara Refining. Mr. Vice President, in addition to Trintoc and Trintopec, another company that is integral to the existing corporate structure, Petrotrin, is Paliseco Agricultural Enterprises Limited, or PSEAL. PSAEL, a former subsidiary of Trintopec, was incorporated in 1986. From inception to the mid-90s, the main focus of the company was agriculture, hence the name. However, with the advent of Petrotrin in 1993, the merger and vesting of the oil-related assets of Trintoc and Trintopec in Petrotrin, PSAEL's core function shifted to the provision of project management services to Petrotrin. PSAEL was made a wholly owned state enterprise in 2007 and continues to provide project management services. Importantly, for this purpose, PSAEL holds 3,375 acres of land on which Petrotrin currently undertakes exploration and production operations. Those lands are in Kura and Quarry and Paliseco. in order to expedite the transfer of all the exploration and production operations from Petrotrin to Heritage Petroleum, it is further proposed that those lands be directly vested in Heritage Petroleum from PSAEL through the vesting bill. So, Mr. Vice President, coming to the terms of the vesting bill itself, it is in the context of the preceding information that I turn to the clauses. The bill contains 8 clauses and 6 schedules, and is organized in parts related to Heritage Petroleum, Paria fuel trading, Guaracara refining, respectively. Clause 1 is the short title and provides for the Act to be referred to as the Miscellaneous Provisions, Heritage Petroleum, Paria Fuel Trading, and Guaracara Refining Vesting Act, 2018. Clause 2 provides for the interpretation of certain words and phrases, including definitions for the terms appointed day, E&P contracts, minister, and point-of-pay refinery site. Clauses 1 and 2 together comprise Part 1 of the bill, which addresses preliminary matters. Part 2 of the bill is comprised of clauses 3 and 4 and provides for the transfer to and vesting of assets in the Heritage Petroleum Company Limited. Clause 3, subclause 1 of the bill, provides for all of the assets of Petrotrin relative to the exploration and production operations described in Schedule 1 to be transferred to and vested in Heritage Petroleum. Clause 3, subclause 2, will transfer to and vest in Heritage Petroleum 3,725 acres of land consisting of 2 separate parcels, 1,829 acres in Kura and Quarry, and 1,896 acres in Palo Seco, more particularly described in Schedule 2 and now held by PSAEL. As mentioned, this transfer will allow Heritage Petroleum to continue the exploration and production operations currently undertaken by Petrotrin on the PSAEL lands. Clause 4 of the bill sets out the effect of the vesting of the assets in Heritage Petroleum and provides for Petrotrin's existing exploration and production contracts, as well as the contracts described in Schedule 3 to be continued with Heritage Petroleum as a party instead and in place of Petrotrin, and further for Heritage Petroleum in all instances to be substituted for any reference in those contracts to Petrotrin. Therefore, Mr. Vice President, clauses 3 and 4 together will facilitate Heritage Petroleum on the appointed day immediately assuming responsibility for the exploration and production operations at present undertaken by Petrotrin, as it will become not only seized and possessed of all the lands and oil fields used for exploration and production activities, but also become a party to all the contracts, leases, licenses, and operatorships under which these exploration and production activities are now undertaken. Clause 5.
Minister, may I ask Lee?
Sure.
I'm trying to understand. I understand what it is the government is trying to do, but I'm not seeing anything that actually speaks about these companies. So I wonder if, Minister, you could let us know when these companies were incorporated, who are the directors, the shareholders, where the registered offices, the bylaws, because these are going to be very important vehicles for these transfers of assets and liabilities. So in principle, I don't have a problem with the concept, but I would like some more information about the vehicles themselves, please.
Okay, I did provide some of that information earlier in my presentation. What I indicated was that the companies were formed early in October. I think it's the 4th of October, and the sole shareholder of each of the new companies is the holding company, Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, and that company in turn is owned wholly by the corporation sole. I'm unable at this time to give you details of who the directors are, but they are public companies, so that information is publicly available. Clause 5 is where I think I had got to, Mr. Vice President. Clause 5 of the bill is also Part 3 and provides for the vesting of assets for the terminaling operations of the Paria fuel trading. By virtue of Clause 5, all of the assets of Petrotrin relative to the terminaling operations described in Schedule 4 will be transferred to and vested in Paria fuel trading. Terminaling operations, Mr. Vice President, refer to the midstream natural gas gathering, crude oil gathering, pipeline, transportation, and storage facilities, and relate to certain activities undertaken at the Point-à-Pierre refinery. Schedule 4, which I shall turn to in due course, sets out in greater detail the right, title, claim, or interest of Petrotrin in terminaling at the Point-à-Pierre refinery site that will be taken over by Paria Fuel Trading. Part 4 of the bill, which provides for the vesting of certain assets essential to the intended business operation of Guaracara refining, is comprised of Clause 6. Pursuant to Clause 6, Subclause 1, all of the assets of Petrotrin relative to the refining operations described in Schedule 5 will be transferred to and vested in Guaracara refining. Clause 6, Subclause 2, will provide for the assets of Trintoc and Trintopec described in Schedule 6 to be transferred to and vested in Guaracara refining. Mr. Vice President, those assets are the additional assets of Trintoc and Trintopec discussed earlier, namely reservoirs, a water treatment plant, and associated water infrastructure. The final part of the bill, Part 5, consists of Clauses 7 and 8 and addresses miscellaneous matters. Clause 7, the ultimate clause of the bill, provides for a waiver of stamp duty payable under the Stamp Duty Act, Chapter 7601, upon the transfer and vesting of the undertakings of Petrotrin, PSAEL, Trintoc, and Trintopec. It should be noted, Mr. Vice President, that a similar waiver of stamp duty was also a feature of both the Petrotrin Vesting Act and the Trinidad and Tobago Oil Company Limited Vesting Act, in both cases at Section 5. Clause 8 of the bill provides for the commencement of the Act on the 1st of December 2018. Mr. Vice President, each of the 6 schedules of the bill groups assets of similar classification corresponding with the company which is to be vested with those assets. As such, Schedules 1, 2, and 3 detail assets to be vested in Heritage Petroleum. Schedule 1 sets out the property and rights comprising all the assets of the exploration and production operations of Petrotrin. For example, it includes all mining leases, production sharing contracts, pipeline and other licenses, onshore and offshore oil fields, the crude oil pipeline on the Point-à-Pierre refinery site, and shares in subsidiary companies that engage in exploration and production activity. Schedule 2 describes PSAEL lands located at Kura and Quarry, shown shaded on a map marked Map A1, and the Palo Seco shown and shaded on a map marked A2. Schedule 3 consists of 2 contracts related to water treatment, in which Heritage Petroleum is to be substituted as a party instead of Petrotrin. Schedule 4 lists all of the assets, rights, and properties to be transferred to Paria Fuel Trading from Petrotrin, specifically assets related to the terminaling operations of Petrotrin, and includes a portion of the Point-à-Pierre refinery shown shaded on the map marked Map B. The remaining Schedules 5 and 6 both relate to assets to be transferred to Guaracara refining. Schedule 5 sets out the particulars of the Point-à-Pierre refinery assets to be transferred to Guaracara refining, and which are shown as shaded on a map marked Map C. Finally, Schedule 6 refers to the non-core assets of Trintoc and Trintopec, also to be transferred to Guaracara refining. Mr. Vice President, I would like to conclude with the projections of the restructured company produced by consultants and based on operations to date. The net foreign exchange earnings of the restructured Petrotrin is estimated to be US $316 million per year, calculated as follows. Inflows to total US $1.959 billion, comprise US $1.022 billion from the sale of crude oil, US $809 million from sales of refined products in the region, and US $128 million from sales of refined products through bunkering. The total outflows are estimated at $1.643 billion and comprise US $720 million for local use, US $799 million for importation of refined products and regional use, and US $124 million importation of refined products for bunkering. These are the actual projections of the analysts and the experts hired by Petrotrin. But, Mr. Vice President, we have decided to be conservative and use a figure of $200 million US as the net figure that we expect to generate from this exercise. This figure is to be placed in the context of the cumulated losses between 2012 and 2017 of $11.4 billion. Yes, Senator.
Honourable Minister, thank you very much. The experts and consultants and analysts that you're referring to, could you give us the names of these consultants and whether the reports that you are looking at and you have looked at, would you be able to make those reports available to us so that we can better contribute to this debate?
Mr. Vice President, we will deal with that later in the proceedings. Mr. President, naysayers have expressed skepticism with respect to crude oil produced by Petrotrin and whether we could find a market for those oils. Thus far, Petrotrin has achieved a sale of our crude oil at a price that is approximately $3 more than the world price of West Texas International. I reiterate, Mr. Vice President, that the price received by Petrotrin for the first shipment of crude oil averaged in excess of US $64 per barrel at a time when WTI was trading at $61 a barrel. So, in fact, we have gained more than what was obtained under the WTI price scheme. Additionally, Mr. Vice President, I would have mentioned previously the previous government, the projects government is undertaken to fence line communities in order to mitigate the fallout from the termination of some of the jobs at Petrotrin. The government is progressing along this line to introduce those projects so that we can, in fact, mitigate the fallout of the terminations that are taking place. In summary, all this bill is doing, just like the 1993 vesting bill, is vesting certain assets of Petrotrin in various companies, which will all be state-owned enterprises, to be wholly owned and controlled by Corporation Seoul. Mr. Vice President, the 4 companies are designed to reverse the financial abyss in which Petrotrin found itself, and we will champion the success of these companies with proper governance, management, and sensible policies to ensure that they present a gain to the taxpayers of this country. Because, Mr. Vice President, if we were to do what some advisors have been promoting, or some commentators have been promoting, in keeping Petrotrin running in its current form, not only is it at risk of bankrupting the country and redirecting resources that should be used on projects like schools and health and social services, but we would be increasing the borrowing cost of the country that we are currently incurring to an end that does not guarantee a positive return or profit for the company as currently structured. We have looked at the figures and determined that this is the only reasonable solution. The projections are positive. The vesting order allows for the non-interruption of business, the smooth transition, and we recommend this to the members of the Senate. Ask for your support in this matter. Mr. Vice President, I thank you and I beg to move.
Honourable Senators, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Vest Certain Assets of Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited in Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, and the Guaracara Refining Company Limited to vest certain assets of Trinidad and Tobago Oil Company Limited and Trinidad and Tobago Petroleum Company Limited in the Guaracara Refining Company Limited, and to vest Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited lands in Heritage Petroleum Company Limited be now read a second time. Senator Ramdeen.
Mr. Vice President, good afternoon, and thank you again and thank you for the privilege to be able to contribute to this debate on an act that may be cited as the Miscellaneous Provisions, Heritage Petroleum, Paria Fuel Trading, and Guaracara Refining Vesting Act 2018. Mr. Vice President, since the 28th of August of this year, the chairman of Petrotrin, Mr. Espinay, announced the closure of the refinery at Pointe-a-Pitre. And since that day, Mr. Vice President, the workers of Petrotrin have been virtually living a real nightmare because of the actions of this government. And every single day, Mr. Vice President, it gets worse. It's like a bad dream reoccurring every single day. Yesterday, they had the version of the pension plan. On the 2nd of September, the Prime Minister addressed the country. And he told the country, the Honorable Prime Minister, that when the refinery is closed, the government had no choice. They had to close the refinery. There would be 1,700 workers affected. 1,700. That was the Prime Minister on the 2nd of September. All of a sudden, Mr. Vice President, like an avalanche, the numbers started to increase because the opposition decided to expose the truth about what was going on in this matter. And the truth of the matter is, Mr. Vice President, that on the 30th of November, 2018, 1 month before Christmas, 5,322 workers, in the words of the chairman of Petrotrin, Mr. Espinay, everybody gone. All. Right? So that's 5,322. Give me a minute, Mr. Vice President, to indicate that according to the union, in addition to the 5,322, there are 3,500 contract workers that are also affected by this decision. So 1 month before Christmas, they're gone too. There are 6,000 retirees that are part of that pension plan that was spoken about earlier. They are affected as well. And when we look at the families of these persons that are going to be affected, Mr. Vice President, it is almost 100,000 people that are directly affected by this assault on the government, on the working class of the people of this country. And I want to assure the working class, the hard-working people, Mr. Vice President, the people who have sent their children to school for 4 years to get a mechanical and a chemical engineering degree, and their dream is to look forward to a job at Petrotrin, that the opposition will continue to fight this government and to prevent this government from taking away the livelihood and the bread of these people every single day. Mr. Vice President, let me get down because there are a number of things. I want to answer the question that Senator Vieira asked earlier with the minister in the Ministry of Finance, who is piloting this bill today, could not tell us who the directors are and when the companies were incorporated. That is the heart and soul of what we come here to debate today, you know. The heart and soul. So, there are 3 companies, Senator Vieira, that we are here today to deal with. Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, incorporated on the 5th of October 2018. And, you know, I know that while I speak here today, the people of Trinidad and Tobago will be looking on. And I want them to look on carefully today. Because you see these 4 pages that I have in my hand here, Mr. Vice President. I'll give you a little story about these 4 pages in a short while. This company, and the date is very important, Mr. Vice President. This company was incorporated on the 5th of October 2018. To answer the questions, the directors of the company are Mr. Winfred Espine and Mr. Renal Adjoda Singh.
She didn't know that.
Right?
The minister didn't know that? No, she didn't.
The registered office is 5th floor, Newtown Center, 30 to 36 Maraval Road, Newtown, Port of Spain. And the incorporator is Mr. Winfred Espine. So that is 1. That is Heritage. Guaracara Refining Company Limited. 5th of October 2018, incorporated. Incorporator, Winfred Espine. Directors, Winfred Espine. Renal Adjoda Singh. 4 pages again, Mr. Vice President. The 4 pages will be relevant in a short while. Next one, Paria Fueling Trading Company Limited. Mr. Vice President, this company was incorporated on the 5th of October as well, 2018. And to no surprise, the directors are Mr. Winfred Espine and Mr. Renal Adjoda Singh. And the secretary is Ms. Orisha Maharaj. And the registered office is 5th floor, Newtown Center, 30 to 36 Maraval Road, Newtown, Port of Spain. The incorporator is Mr. Winfred Espine. You would realize, Mr. Vice President, for those who can't see, and I don't want to display it, that these are 4 documents. For those who are not lawyers, these are 4 documents, 3 documents, sorry, that you virtually just fill in a standard form, and you file it in the registry. It was done on the 5th of October. I heard the minister, the honorable Minister of Energy, pointing fingers at the opposition and talking about corruption, everything is not corruption, right? So you see those 3 documents that I just read from, which is virtually somebody sitting in an office and filling in the blanks and putting Winfred Espine and Renal Adjoda Singh and the registered office of the company. You know this Petrotrin that they want to tell, this government wants to tell the country, it have no money. They're bankrupt, right? There's something, Mr. Vice President. The people who were responsible for doing that was the firm of Johnson, Camacho and Sons. They sent in their invoice to Petrotrin on the 12th of October 2018, and it cost the taxpayers of this country, the 3 documents that I just put in there. For those who are lawyers, they will understand. It cost the taxpayers of this country $168,000 to do that. Right? We see when you point your finger at one person, it has 4 pointing back at you. So today you'll hear the story about that. $168,000 it cost them. $168,988 for professional services to incorporate 3 companies.
Let's buy the code in that for $100.
Mr. Vice President, it's very disturbing. This entire affair of this restructuring of Petrotrin is a matter that the opposition takes very seriously. The opposition takes it very seriously, Mr. Vice President, because from where I sit, and when I look at what has happened here, it is like a web of illegality taking place, left, right, and center. And you see, earlier, Mr. Vice President, I said that these companies were incorporated on the 5th of October. And I said we must take note of the date, the 5th of October. You see, Mr. Vice President, I have in my hand here the cabinet minute, when cabinet considered this matter. So I'll tell you just now, hold on, just now. You know where this document came from? It didn't come in no post box. You see this document? Cabinet minute F Roman 1181, where cabinet considered this matter. You know when cabinet considered this? On the 7th of November, 2018. So here what the introductory note of the cabinet, here what the introductory paragraph of the cabinet note says. Company incorporated on the 5th of October. The matter for the consideration of cabinet is the grant of covering approval for the establishment of new businesses for exploration and production terminaling, and refinery after November 30, 2018, closure of the operations of the Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago, Petrotrin, through a vesting act and ministerial order, which would take effect on December 1st, 2018. So how it is, Mr. Vice President, perhaps the Minister of Energy will be able to explain to us that Cabinet is considering this matter to give approval to do what was already done more than a month ago when Cabinet was doing it. And you know, I'm expecting that somebody's going to get up and say, like the floods down in Pluck Road and Woodland, that this might be a fake Cabinet note. Just like how the floods were fake. But let me tell you something, Mr. Vice President. You see this Cabinet note? You see the stamp from Cabinet here? This wasn't delivered in any post box. This was given to me by a member of the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. That's why it's not fake. That's why it's not fake.
Examine the hall.
And you know what it was told to me when it was given to me by a member of the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago? The Cabinet led by the Honorable Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. He said, Ramdeen, we want you to expose this. Because you know why? We don't have no choice in the Cabinet. When they bring it, we just had to agree. So let the people in the Cabinet also do their job, because the people who are sitting in the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago are upset about what is going on. Because they understand what the working class... You notice, Mr. Vice President, 1 month before Christmas, to send home over 10,000 people?
Wickedness.
In the season of giving. I'm waiting for this government, the last sitting of this session, to get up and talk about the season of giving. In the season of giving, they take away 10,000 jobs.
My God.
In the season of giving, and they will get up at the last sitting and they will talk about Christmas and giving. In the season of giving, you take away 10,000 jobs. I wonder if anybody understands that on the 30th of November, when the 25th of December reach, 10,000 families do have a salary. There are people where 2 breadwinners are working in Petrotrin. They will face Christmas without an income. What is going to happen to their children? What is going to happen to their children at university? You know the answer to that was, Mr. Vice President? The answer that the population of Trinidad and Tobago was told was that when the refinery shuts down, all you have to do is go down by the San Fernando Wharf. We open our waterfront down there. You will get a job down there. And you know what to do? If you don't get it there, travel a little further south, down to Labre, and you'll get a job there. So let me tell you the reasoning of this government, Mr. Vice President. The reasoning of the government is this. I sacrificed to send my child to school to become a chemical engineer, to become a mechanical engineer, right? You know, when the refinery closed down, the same son or daughter that I sacrificed for 4 years to send to become a chemical engineer, living their dream like Senator Ramki soon. You know what she had to do? Go down by the wharf and sell some carrot and herring. And when you don't get through that, go and build some boat down in Labre. That is the reasoning of the government. That is what they sell to the population. That is in the best interest of the population. But I'm happy that the Minister of Finance said this afternoon that the reason why Petrotrin is in this position is because it was $19 billion in cost overruns. $19 billion in cost overruns. Under which administration?
PNM.
The PNM.
The PNM.
So every single...
Don't try that, the PNM. Don't try that. That is false. The PNM.
Vice President. So, Mr. Vice President, every single project that comprised that $19 billion cost overrun was started under our PNM administration. Every single one. So don't disown it now. Don't disown it now at all. So, Mr. Vice President, the Cabinet note shows that Cabinet considered this giving authority ex post facto totally unlawful. You start off with that. After that, Mr. Vice President, we go to this individual. Well, let me just quickly touch on this one. Mr. Vice President, the Minister in the Ministry of Finance gives us the impression that these new companies, Guaracara, Paria, Heritage, as paints the picture that everything is going to be rosy from here on. Answering the question of Senator Vieira, I told you, the same directors of Petrotrin, the same chairman, is the same chairman who's going to be in these companies, you know. That's why Senator Vieira asked that, because you want to know who are going to run these companies. If is it going to be any different from what happened in Petrotrin, and I will show you how it will be no different. You know why, Mr. Vice President? Yesterday, the Industrial Court gave a decision where they found Petrotrin, pursuant to a decision taken by a Petrotrin board, led by the same chairman who is now a director on 3 of these companies. You know what the Industrial Court found? Let me read it. Paragraph 46. We therefore find that for the reasons stated above, the facts found by this court, we therefore find that for the reasons stated above and the facts found by this court, the industrial relations offense under Section 14 has been made out. Illegality number 2. The same people who are running Petrotrin today are the same people who have been found to have made a decision that a superior court of record has found to be committing an industrial offense under the Industrial Relations Act. Let them continue with that. So that's illegality number 2. So let's go down to illegality number 3. Mr. Vice President, we have been hearing a lot about this man called Mr. Mike Wiley, who has been hired, according to the Honorable Prime Minister, since August. Let me quote the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Vice President. The Honorable Prime Minister said, so far Petrotrin has used international recruitment processes to hire one person of the highest caliber so far, because it's the intention of Petrotrin to use international benchmarking so that the oil company be engaged in oil company production. Excellent. Mr. Vice President, the Leader of the Opposition raised this matter in another place. And while listening to the debate, I heard the response of the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Minister of Finance, and the Leader of the Opposition in raising this very serious matter, Mr. Vice President, because the Minister of Energy said today he doesn't know who are the people who are responsible for the duty that is placed upon them to decide who is going to buy the petroleum that comes out of the ground that belongs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. He's not business about that. He don't know about that. He don't get involved in that. But it may be very good for the Minister of Finance to go back and read Section 5 of the Petroleum Act that places the statutory duty on the running of this industry called the petroleum industry on the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs. All right, sorry, industry. But you see, Mr. Vice President, this Petroleum Act has some regulations attached to it. And one of the regulations is Regulation 42F. And let me quickly just run through 42F. It provides that a licensee shall minimize the employment of foreign personnel. Foreign personnel, they should minimize it. This is a duty on every licensee. Ensure that such employees are engaged only in positions for which the operator cannot, after reasonable advertisement in at least one daily newspaper circulated in Trinidad and Tobago, find available nationals of Trinidad and Tobago having the necessary qualification and experience. Determining the rules of employment, including salary scales, in such manner as to ensure that all employees in the same category enjoy equal conditions irrespective of nationality. So the Petroleum Act says that these companies, Paria, Guaracara, Heritage, they have a duty to ensure that they comply with Section 42F, which places a further duty on them to make sure if you're going to fill positions, they must be filled by locals first. So, Mr. Vice President, when the Honorable Prime Minister tells us that Petrotrin has recruited an international firm and they brought Mr. Wiley here, you know what the response of the Minister of Finance was? The response was, Heritage is not a licensee. That was the response. So that do apply to Heritage. Well, Mr. Vice President, with the greatest respect, I know the Minister of Finance is a man with immense qualification. He has 2 masters in law. I understand with distinctions. But Mr. Vice President, with 2 masters in law and a distinction, you tell me that you don't understand that Petrotrin is the licensee and Petrotrin is the person that the Prime Minister said employed Mr. Wiley. So did Petroleum breach the law when they employed Mr. Wiley and didn't comply with 42F? It's as simple as that. That's illegality number 3. But while I'm on that, Mr. Vice President, while I'm on that, I want to just make reference to an article here on page A15 of The Guardian of Saturday, November 17, 2018. The headline of the article is Young at Post-Cabinet Briefing, Heritage CEO hired by Global Recruiter. You see, the same question that all of us keep asking, Mr. Vice President, is why does the government not come clean with the people of Trinidad and Tobago and tell them the truth about what is happening? Exactly. So we understand from Minister Young that the firm Egon Zandan, I hope I pronounced that correct, specializes in executive and CEO searches and other recruitment services. And this is what the article says, Mr. Vice President. Young was asked about Wiley's recruitment at yesterday's post-cabinet briefing in Tobago after the issue was raised by the UNC leader Kamla Persad-Bissessa and other opposition MPs. He said recruitments were being done by 2 international firms. And this is what I want to concentrate on, Mr. Vice President. He said recruitments were being done by 2 international firms, but he couldn't recall their names. Sounds similar, we just don't know the names, no problem. Mr. Vice President, I have a document here that was provided to me, not in my mailbox, but by a member of the board of Petroleum. The document that I'm going to read from is a document prepared by the finance committee in Petroleum. It is titled, Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited, Consultancy Costs Incurred, 2017, October 1st to 2018, to October 31st, 2018. Restructuring costs. These are the costs that have been incurred by Petroleum in relation to Heritage, in relation to Paria, and in relation to Guaracara. The table is headed up, Heritage, Paria. So let's get into it, Mr. Vice President. Let the people of Trinidad and Tobago know that in order to recruit Mr. Wiley by the international firm that was announced by Minister Young, Egon Zander International, between the 28th of June 2018 and the 21st of August, the 21st of June 2018 to the 21st of August 2018, the firm was paid the small sum. I want to state slowly. $4,554,813.97. That was to hire the man that is being paid $250,000 a month. $4,554,813.97. But Mr. Young couldn't remember that time. Who was the other firm? Professional Resourcing Solutions Limited. Between September 17th and October 26th, the same firm, Petroleum, the same Petroleum that don't have no money, between September 17th and October 26th, that's 40 days, Professional Resourcing Solutions Limited was paid $3.7 million. $3,739,846. Wow. That's from Petroleum, who don't have no money. You got better than that, Mr. Vice President. You heard this happened, the same debate we have now. Senator Mark got up and asked the minister, can you tell us who are these consultants that providing all this advice to the government? McKinsey. Very important, very familiar name to everybody. Top of the line, first in class. Let me tell you what the people of Trinidad and Tobago have been paying for the first in class advice from McKinsey. Between the period 28th of June and the 31st of October 2018, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, through Petroleum, have paid McKinsey $66 million for advice. 66 million. You want the exact figure? $54,008,237.50 plus $12,836,685. $12,836,685. $836,685, in excess of $66 million for advice. That's one firm, you know. But you know, people of Trinidad were upset about this thing about Mr. Wiley. They find it bad that he get paying $225,000 a month. Mr. Vice President, let me tell you why I'm doing this. Why I'm doing this is because I am putting on the Hansard today the same position that Petroleum finds itself in today and found itself in as a result of decisions of our PNM administration, $19 billion in cost overruns. It is going to be no different under Paria, Heritage, and Guaracara, under the people appointed by them. And let me tell you why, Mr. Vice President. The board member provided me with another document. It might be very familiar to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. The Honorable Senator, Mr. Franklin Khan, dated the 8th of August 2018, a letter written by none other than Mr. Wilfred Espinay, Chairman of Petroleum, copying the Minister of Finance and the Minister in the Office of the Attorney General, the Honorable Minister Stuart Young. Let me tell you the story about this one, Mr. Vice President, and let Trinidad and Tobago know what is going on under the PNM. Everything is above board. They have no corruption. So listen to this one. Mr. Espinay, the Chairman of Petroleum, is writing to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. Here he's writing him to tell him on the 8th of August. We write to seek your assistance in supporting and support in obtaining a work permit for Mr. and I don't want to spell the man's name wrong, Mr. Vice President. Chyau Chor Lin. Mr. Chor Lin, Mr. Lin. I'm sure the minister would know, is very familiar with this. Of number 505 North Lake Shore Drive, apartment 1303, Chicago, Illinois, United States of America. And here what it is about, Mr. Vice President. Following our review of top management at Petroleum, it was determined that a head downstream executive was a critical deficiency. As a result, an international search was conducted. Again, illegality again, right? Don't worry, Trinidad have no good people. When you hear the minister talk about Trevor Boop Singh, everybody you know, Trevor Boop Singh, right? Big thing, but all of a sudden, in 2018, no educated people in Trinidad to get any work at Petroleum. So we only look at international. International executive search was conducted. After an exhaustive process, Mr. Lin was chosen as the best candidate equipped for the downstream position. Mr. Lin has broad international expertise with a focus in the downstream sector and is available to commence work in 2 weeks. You know the story of Mr. Lin was? Tell you the story about Mr. Lin. I'm going back to my board document that was provided by the member of the board. And it just so happened that I find Mr. Lin's name on this list of expenses. But here the interesting thing about Mr. Lin, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Lin has an invoice dated the 21st of September 2018. Here the remarks on this one, Mr. Vice President. Reimbursement of expenses as per contract. You know what happened with Mr. Lin? Mr. Lin never worked for Petroleum. He signed up on the contract, and then Petroleum decided, we ain't doing that again. So we had to pay off Mr. Lin. You know the taxpayers, how much Mr. Lin cost the taxpayers of this country? $1,729,372.58. When you telling people they must go home on the 30th of November, and you're guaranteeing, the Minister of Finance read out a list, you're guaranteeing money to Petroleum. You're guaranteeing Petroleum can't do anything good. You know why Petroleum in the position there? Because of decisions like this. And when you have $19 billion in cost overruns and you come and fool the population, you deceive the population, you come and tell the population everything will be real honky-dory, here go after, right? You employ a man, you pay him $1.7 million, and he never work a day for Petroleum. How you want us to accept that? How you want us to accept that, Mr. Vice President? And you come here to talk about heritage and Paria and Guaracara? We're not accepting that, and we're not supporting this. You know why we're not supporting it? Because this country has seen in black and white the reputation of the PNM. Between 2010, they like to come and talk about between 2010 and 2015, oil was $100 a barrel, and what they do with it? when oil was $140 a barrel and when natural gas was $12 per MMBTU, this government was singing this same song from this same hymn book and saying everything will be good until we had to fix it between 2010 and 2015.
When the price was high, they went and borrowed.
So, Mr. Vice President, while I was going through this list, this same list about expenses, you know the Minister of Finance said, sorry, the Minister of Energy and Energy Industry said, see, nothing is corruption on the PNM. It's not like all you. But the first name on the list, Caribbean Corporate Clinic. You ever hear about them? Somewhere in Woodbrook, I understand. All of a sudden, like Easter Sunday, they resurrect from somewhere. I never heard about this firm before, Caribbean Corporate Clinic. All of a sudden, in March of this year, this company called Caribbean Corporate Clinic start billing Petrotrin $200,000 a month. $200,000 a month. $102,000 on a monthly basis. Invoice going in at the end of the month. I say, well, I don't know who these people is. I have to find out what is this. It's taxpayers' money, you know. Them in a few months they rack up $918,000. So I went and paid $20, get the company documents, and lo and behold, who is the directors of this company? Who getting paid $102,000 and $204,000 a month? Shafiq Sultan Khan. You remember that man, Mr. Vice President? A man who was answering why, before the election of 2010, Wassa was giving out a contract for $700 million, and he said nothing wrong with that. And all of a sudden, he became the chairman of CL Financial under the PNM. All of a sudden, he resurrected under Paria, Heritage, and Guaracara. So his company, Mr. Shafiq Sultan Khan, pulling out $102,000 a month from Petrotrin, who doesn't have any money, according to the government, and everything running smooth. But we can't be told what they're doing, and we don't know what they're doing. Anyway, the people at Petrotrin, Mr. Vice President, the one thing I want to tell you is that if you have the opportunity, Mr. Vice President, it will be useful for you to have lunch with these people. Because when they have a meeting, their lunch bill for one meeting down at Petrotrin, they only eat $23,000 in food. $23,000 in food. When you have 10,000 people who are not sure they'll get a meal at the end of November 30th, you're eating $23,000 in food. Everybody eating our food down here. Solomon and Associates. Remember when Senator Mark asked for the Solomon report, and that one was dropped in my mailbox? They only bill the government, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, $7.4 million, in addition to the $66 million that Mackenzie was billing. It is going to be no different. The PNM cannot resist. They cannot resist spending the taxpayers' money in this manner. And it will be no different. You know what it is like to stand up here to debate a bill today, and the minister who has the statutory responsibility for the petroleum sector doesn't know who evaluating the bids for the petroleum that is being pulled out of the ground, that somehow is going to bring $200 million to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. You can believe that? You expect us to accept that?
Incompetence. Incomparable incompetence.
Mr. Vice President, today is not a day. Today is not a day for us to sit down and hear about who get educated down in Guaya, and when they went and they worked for Petrotrin, and they went and worked for Shell, and they know. You see, today we want answers. We want the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. Don't tell us about the history of the PNM when you get up to speak, and the history of how you became an engineer. We want to know what's going on in Petrotrin today. Because you see, Mr. Vice President, I'm happy to see Mr. Andre Hossain here today. I'm really happy. Because Mr. Hossain, who is sitting in the public gallery, provided an opinion to the Senior Manager, Law and Land Management on June 20th, 2017, about the effect of splitting up this company and providing and doing exactly what this Parliament is asked to do today. And Mr. Hossain made reference, the opinion is dated 20th of June 2017. The subject is the effect of splitting Petrotrin on the $850 million US indenture. And Mr. Hussain made reference to Section 6, Article 6, Section 6.01. A, when company may merge or transfer assets, successor company, for so long as, and this is what it says, for so long as any securities are outstanding, the company may not consolidate with or merge into any other person or convey or transfer its properties and assets substantially as an entity to any person unless, and there are certain conditions. You see, Mr. Vice President, one of the issues that arise is whether when we are asked to do this today as a parliament and legitimize what we are being asked to do in this piece of legislation, whether one of the consequences is that we will be endangering the financial system of Trinidad and Tobago because these bonds could then fall into a position of default. And I have no confidence in anything that the government tells us about. They meet with bondholders. You know what the people of Trinidad and Tobago heard today? Credit squeeze, blades, and all of a sudden, Ansa Makal. Nothing is wrong with that. Nothing is wrong with that. What is wrong is what I disclosed in today. We want to know the answers to this. What is wrong with that? Because I'm sure soon, some cabinet minister or some board member will provide me with the details of what is going on with that. What is wrong with that, Mr. Vice President, to answer the talk about what is wrong with it? What is wrong with it is that we get the names of who doing it, but we have no details of what is being done. The people of Trinidad and Tobago have to pay that $850 million back. The $850 million...
Senator, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Vice President, thank you very much. The $850 million that was borrowed, that the people of Trinidad and Tobago, when the government conveniently finds the time now to tell the people, well, that money could have been used on schools and hospitals and books and roads. When they were spending it and borrowing the $850 million at 9.5% on the international market and having the bondholders have a noose around the neck of the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, they wasn't studying schools and books and roads and children and computers. They wasn't studying that. But today, the minister in the Ministry of Finance could come and tell us, don't worry about the bond. The bond is being renegotiated. But as a parliament, we don't know. We could know who it's being renegotiated with. But we don't know what the terms are. What is the secret? Why does everything that surrounds this Petroleum saga always has to be shrouded in secrecy? And the people, it is not, the government must understand. This is not the PNM money they're dealing with. This is not money that belongs to Balize House. This is money that belongs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We have a right to know. We have a right to know how much Ansa Makal is being paid to refinance the bond. We have a right to know how much Credit Suisse is being paid to refinance the bond. So that, Mr. Vice President, you see this entire Petroleum saga, this entire Guaracara, Paria, and Heritage is going to bring no relief to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It is because it is the same players that got rid of the staff at Petroleum, the same players who Mr. Espine say, I wasn't responsible for making a decision to shut down Petroleum. It wasn't me. Everything you asked Mr. Espine, it wasn't me. Those are the same players that are going to fill the positions. Let me tell you, Mr. Vice President, let me tell you one more thing about this cabinet note. You see this cabinet note? Let me tell Trinidad and Tobago. They didn't read when they get it. One of the things that cabinet agreed in this cabinet note was that the maximum number of directors in the new companies will be increased from 7 to 13 for flexibility, consistency, and consistent with general practice. 13 of them they're going to put in each one. So 13 by 4. And what are they going to pay them? Why don't they tell us that? The rumor is each one of them going to get $100,000 a month. They also have laws governing this, but you all didn't know what was in the Petroleum Act and the Petroleum Regulations, so don't tell me nothing about manual and state regulations. You all breach everything possible that you could breach. So don't we want to hear about that. It also have a law called the Petroleum Act. You all didn't know about that either. Mr. Vice President, this opposition is going to oppose this government on this Petroleum issue, because it is clear to us that the people of Trinidad and Tobago are the victims of this decision.
Yeah.
The hard-working people of Trinidad and Tobago, the people who have toiled for years to give their children an education, the people who have toiled for years in Petrotrin don't know if their pension is safe when they leave Petrotrin on the 30th of November. And the excuses that are being proffered by the government over and over and over are just simply a tissue of untruths. And like you say, Mr. Vice President, it comes to mind. It comes to mind. I want to end with that. What a tangled web we weave when we first set out to deceive. Stop the deception, Mr. Vice President. The people of Trinidad and Tobago deserve better than that. I thank you.
Senator Vieira.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And I want to thank my colleagues for allowing me to jump the queue. I'm leaving early today. I wasn't planning to speak on this bill, but after hearing the Honourable Minister, I felt I should say a few things, because while I very much understand the concept of a vesting order, it makes very good sense commercially, and it's an expedient mechanism to avoid stamp duty, conveyancing, taxes, all the paraphernalia that would go with this momentous type of undertaking. And I think it was also done, as the Minister said, with Petrotrin, and I think it was done with FCB as well, with the Penny Bank and the Trinidad Cooperative. So this is nothing sinister here, nothing new. It makes good financial and corporate sense. But the effect of this bill will do away with Petrotrin, because after this bill takes effect, Petrotrin is just a shell. So this is a momentous undertaking, and we need to treat with it seriously. And here's where I have a little problem, because we are talking about major assets. We're transferring lands, assets, contracts from Petrotrin to these three companies, Heritage, Paria, and Guaracara. Right? And we are not talking little assets. We're talking about oil mining leases, production sharing contracts, petroleum licenses, pipeline licenses, onshore, offshore oil fields, crude oil pipeline. We're talking about tank farms, harbors, docks, berths, pipelines, machinery, equipment, buildings, roads, drains. It's a serious undertaking, this. And so my concern really has to do with transparency, accountability, and good governance. And that's going to be my approach in almost everything when it comes to things of this nature. It's called the TAG formula: transparency, accountability, and good governance. Now, given the seriousness of this undertaking and the implications and the consequences, I would have thought we would have had a little more information. You know, because you're taking it from entity A and you're giving it to entity B. Entity A, I know, was not a perfect entity, but I know nothing about entity B. I would want to know that my successor is up to the point. Do these companies have staff? Do these companies have furniture? If these companies wanted to open a bank account, they couldn't do it with the information that we've been given in this Parliament. I could tell you, when you have to go for a bank account, you have to provide all kinds of information, down to your address, your projections, all kinds of stuff I would have expected. So I would tell you, that you get a fail for coming here and asking me to do this momentous transfer undertaking. And you can't tell me who the directors are. I would want to know that you have 3 boards in place of people who are eminently qualified to do the things that you're taking from Petrotrin and giving to this new operation. You have the same persons on all 3 boards? Does that make sense? Who's working for them? I have some concerns, and as I say, if you were going to open a bank account here, you would need a lot more basic information. And I would say I would support this bill, but I think a lot more information is required in keeping with the transparency, accountability, and good governance formula. I thank you.
Senator Obika.
Mr. Vice President, I thank you for acknowledging me as I rise to join this debate, but I must say that I am totally disappointed that the government has refused to field another speaker on this bill. I mean, after the lackluster introduction by the Minister in the Ministry of Finance and the scant courtesy given to this House with total absence of information, I would have expected that this government would have tried to correct the record. One would have thought that Senator Vieira's call would have been answered. However, I want to start by saying, Mr. Vice President, that this Petrotrin vesting bill 2018, to keep the title short, will be to the detriment of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So I join this debate to condemn the government for acting illegally. And of course, Senator Ramdeen did an excellent job at pointing out the illegalities. And there are senators to come, of course, who will hammer that point. My focus would be on the impact on energy and energy security. And I ask your guidance in terms of to allow me to refer to my notes, because, of course, this matter is significant, and I want to make sure that I correct the record for the public of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you. So now I repeat this bill, the Miscellaneous Provisions, Heritage Petroleum, Paria Fuel Trading, and Guaracara Refining Vesting Bill 2018, to vest Petrotrin assets and ultimately close down as we know it, Petrotrin. This will be to the detriment of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It will bring harm to the people. It will be injurious to our economy, and it will damage Trinidad and Tobago as we know it. And I want to outline 6 areas where this will happen. The first detriment is job losses. We know in the case of Petrotrin, over 9,000 jobs have already been lost by this callous and wicked act, from persons who are employed directly with the company and persons external to the company. The second detriment would be to the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, the Energy Chamber is on record stating that 400 companies, Mr. Vice President, will be affected negatively by this reckless action of this PNM government. The third detriment is that energy insecurity, and in part 4 of the bill, I will show how that is connected to this whole concept of the Guaracara Refining Company. Energy insecurity has befallen Trinidad and Tobago by the stroke of a pen, by virtue of the shutdown of the refining Petrotrin, and of course, the only persons on the planet who don't believe that Petrotrin has been shut down are the spokespersons for the cabinet. Now, the fourth detriment, Mr. Vice President, and this one is a very severe issue, and it strikes at the heart of why we vote in this country and why we pay taxes, is that the majority of the liabilities of the Petrotrin that we know will not be borne by the new company, but by us, the taxpayers, the citizens of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is a travesty. The 2 bonds that are an incompetent PNM government in 2007 at 6.75 or 6.5%, and in 2009 at 9.5%. Can you imagine when they could have obtained, based on the strength of the company and the future cash flows and so on, probably rates of 2.5 to 3%. So this government has paid over $5.6 billion on one bond, Mr. Vice President, where they could have saved about $4 billion. This is taxpayers' money because of the incompetence. I call it the incomparable incompetence, because it cannot be compared to anything else of the PNM government. So these 2 bonds have been used as the hangman's noose around the people of Trinidad and Tobago and Petrotrin. The fifth detriment, Mr. Vice President, is their uncertain exit costs, which even the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, in its November 2018 just published monetary policy report have flagged as significant risk factors, and I'll get to that when I flesh out each detriment in detail. And the sixth and last detriment I want to point out, Mr. Vice President, which carries us to Schedule 2 of the bill regarding PSAL lands, and they gave us a very inferior map here in the bill, which, despite having newly purchased my spectacles, I can't read. However, we were fortunate to have the proper map. From another source, the real source, which shows how many persons will be affected. And it's very severe. And it's an area that's close to me because I traversed there daily when I was in charge of an office in Paria in the Ministry of Labor. Now, the sixth detriment is that the process outlined in this bill is negative to our national spirit. So let me begin with the sixth detriment first, Mr. Vice President. This bill and its consequences will have a significant negative impact on our national spirit. So I want to turn to an article in today's Guardian newspaper, which reads, "Homes on Trintopec land demolished." For those listening, because there are young persons who I teach, when I ask them about 1990, they tell me that's what their parents tell them about because they weren't born. So when I say Trintopec, I want the young persons to understand what is Petrotrin. For all intents and purposes, it boils down to Petrotrin. The article starts, and I'll just read a brief part of it. After toiling in Trinidad tank farms for the past decade, Anthony Akwi will be one of those without a job come December 1st as a result of the impending closure of Petrotrin. But Akwi was brought to tears yesterday when the Santa Flora home he had pumped thousands of dollars into for his children was reduced to rubble by a contractor who demolished his and other homes in the community. Mr. Vice President, and I was telling my colleagues in the Senate, because I'm from Point Fortin, and I'm very familiar with this area. You cannot, because of our corrupt history of slavery, the entire action envisaged by this vesting bill will break the spirit of families in Trinidad who live on lands by virtue of the cruelty of slavery and indentureship was given to the elite ruling class in this country. So therefore, if you belong to a community in South Trinidad and you weren't given lands by the Crown because your foreparents fought against the Americans in the War of Independence, so you're a company settlement, if you are like the rest of us who had to wait for liberation from slavery or indentureship, you have to now fight for scraps, the lands that weren't taken by the Crown, okay? And once oil was found, there was no land for you and I. So the majority of communities in these areas, in effect, are really squatting. And when you look at the map, Mr. Vice President, the map here, there are many houses on lands that are said to be retained by PSAL and required by Petrotrin. There's a village called Los Bajo. Those who are familiar with South are familiar with that village. I taught a class there in mathematics. And basically the entire village is under threat based on the drawings here. Of course, the government didn't tell the persons that, but the message was received loud and clear in Santa Flora last night. Because as we speak today, there are persons who do not know where their children will sleep tonight because of the wickedness of this PNM government and the sinister actions that are at the heart of this bill. So it's definitely a shame that the great-grandchildren of the people who built this country, the real people who built this country, the majority of people who worked in the sugar and cocoa and coffee, are without a home by the very persons who they elected as government officials themselves. This is land reform, PNM style, Mr. Vice President, to the detriment of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So while it's obvious, it must be obvious, while it's obvious to us, I'm sure it'll be obvious to everyone in Trinidad and Tobago when they consider the scenario. The locals are accused by a Petrotrin chairman of being untrained, incapable of turnaround, unproductive, and all the negative accolades. Now, I think this Parliament, Mr. Vice President, must publicly reprimand an individual by the name of Wilfred Espini. Because I have spent some years in West Africa, and there are African countries today, Equatorial Guinea was here recently at the Energy Symposium. They are declaring that they follow the Trinidad and Tobago model for energy development and energy security in terms of how they treat with the multinationals. If you are a Trinidad and Tobago born and trained right here in St. Augustine and working in the oil companies in Trinidad and Tobago, you can fetch top dollar internationally. We're talking about McKinsey and Solomon and so on. You train here locally in the energy sector, nowhere else, because you are familiar with the Trinidad and Tobago model of development against the multinationals in the interest of your people. You can get top dollar in any country across the world where they are fighting the multinationals, Mr. Vice President. And for Wilfred Espini to go on record as saying that the people in Trinidad and Tobago in Petroleum are untrained and unskilled, he should be chased from out of here from whence he came. Now the debt profile, the other scenarios, the debt profile is blamed as the problem at the time when the price of oil was at a 10-year low, less than $30 a barrel. The Minister of Finance was totally disingenuous by referring to the $26 a barrel, Mr. Vice President. Because right now, the price is buoyant. At 60, last time I checked, it's just under $70 a barrel. It hovers around that price, okay? So they are experiencing good times, and therefore the people shouldn't pay for their incompetence. All locals are summarily retrenched. Petrotrin, they closed down the refinery, and a foreigner is the first man to add insult to injury. On top of it being illegal, a foreigner is the first man brought to be the saving grace of a company where we have taken all the debts from. Where is the Association of Caribbean Energy Specialists, Mr. Vice President? Where are they? I call on them shame today. They must come out and call out this government on this wicked act. And once they call this government, I will retract that statement of shame. And I will add a statement of applause and congratulations for doing what is right in spite of the wickedness of this entire bill. Now, our national spirit, so this is the first detriment only, Mr. Vice President. Our national spirit is one that has everlasting belief in our competence and intellect. There's no one smarter than a Trinbagonian. Sure. But by this action, the PNM has driven a stake to the heart of our national identity and our national spirit. Clauses 3 and 4 will facilitate Heritage Petroleum on the appointed day immediately carrying out with the exploration and production operations under someone who we don't know if you know what is pilau, roti, doubles, bacon shack, you understand? Dancing the jig, borode. That has to do with the spirit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And if you don't know that, the Honorable Minister of Energy, then I'm sorry for you.
Should resign.
So now all of us will be under the control of this new master. You only heard doubles, you didn't hear bacon shack and dancing jig. I want to go to detriment number 1, Mr. Vice President. I wish to ask at what time I should end my presentation.
You end at 4:44.
Sorry?
4:44.
Thank you very much. I'm hearing an Honorable Minister opposite who is from this area, and I know he's grieving inside. I don't know if he was one of the persons who slipped the information to Senator Ramdeen. So detriment number 1, Mr. Vice President, is job losses. Job losses have been the order of the day under this PNM government. And already for the year 2017, the CSO has pointed that 12,000 jobs have been lost. 12,000. Just for 2017. We have no data for 2018 as yet. We know in case of Petrotrin, about the 9,000. The Energy Chamber stated that the closure of Petrotrin could translate to approximately 760 temporary and 735 permanent job losses from their members. So that's about 1,500 jobs to be lost just from their members alone. Okay? Now, I've visited homes of workers. Mr. Vice President. And the story is grave. I spoke to someone who did not go for his letter. He's a returnee from the United States, and he's been a casual employee with Trinma for 6 years. And what he said is that there's a friend of his who went for his letter. And he's been working for over 10 years, Mr. Vice President, at a salary of about $20,000 a month when he gets work, because he's casual also. And you know what? What was his take home, Mr. Vice President? 30,000 TT dollars. This is a man with family, with children at the university. $30,000. Most people have bills to pay. If he even just goes to courts, they'll probably take all of that. You understand? Mr. Vice President, if you go and speak to those persons and tears don't come to your eyes, at that time it will come after you leave, because tears will come. The latest fault that I want to correct is this thing about $50,000 to each worker. Now, when you are peddling untruths, there's a saying that you can cover a lie as long as you want. The light will shine on it. What they basically are giving is a tax break. So if you get, before it was 300,000, now it's 500,000, and you have 25% off, that's 50,000 for the extra $200,000. So that's the tax break you're getting, right? There's someone I know who's been working for 20 years. 3 years was casual, so he's 17 years permanent, full-time. You know what his take-home is, Mr. Vice President? $430,000. That is less than 2 years' pay. And this man has 5 children, all of them in secondary school. Bills to pay, mortgage. Mr. Vice President, the level of wickedness that is envisaged in this legislation. This man has worked 17 years, 20 years, but 17 permanent full-time. He's not even getting the $500,000. So who are the persons who are getting this $500,000 plus? But anyway, detriment number 2, Mr. Vice President. So one was job losses. Number 2 is it's bad for the economy. And in the energy chamber, in pointing out that 400 companies will be affected, they said the Petroleum Paria refinery has been a major customer for many of their service companies. And he said that 59% of these companies provide goods and services to Petroleum. And some of them, Mr. Vice President, their only client is Petroleum. So in effect, they are a ward of Petroleum. So closure of the refinery basically means they are out of business. And everyone is on the breadline.
The energy chamber says so.
And this is the energy chamber. And this article is publicly available. In fact, when you go on their website, this is the first article you see. The other point I wanted to bring is the pension plan is rumored to be a closed plan. Now, there are many issues, but once one reads the letter, Mr. Vice President, once you read that letter from Republic Bank, unless they come and correct the record and say it's not their letter, you get the impression that if the bank, in their wisdom, this is the largest bank in Trinidad and Tobago. This is the largest domestic commercial bank in CARICOM, Mr. Vice President. I must give my bias. I was a former employee at the bank. However, what I'm saying is fact. It does not change the record, all right? That these are facts that I'm saying. So if the largest bank in our economy, and in CARICOM, domestically owned, is saying that they have a problem with this pension fund, based on their advisors, based on their knowledge, that there's a significant problem. I think the government must recognize that there is a problem, and they must come clean to the pensioners, the over 6,000 pensioners who depend on that for their livelihood. So in addition to the 9,000 people on the breadline, Mr. Vice President, you have to add 6,000 pensioners. And do you know what it is to be a Petrotrin pensioner in Point Fortin, in Moruga, in Rio Claro, in Marabella, Mr. Vice President? That means you have plenty more to feed. You yourself, from your pension money, might be footing the bill of grandchildren, Mr. Vice President, of even children. So this government has to fess up. And of course, I'm being reminded of the medical services. In Point Fortin, for 20,000 persons, in Point Fortin, Mr. Vice President, if you are sick and you go to the hospital, it is better to go to the Trinma Health Center in Point Fortin than the hospital in Point Fortin. The hospital in Point Fortin is staffed with hard-working staff, but they're understaffed. If you go to the health center in Trinma, you're okay, but then what's happening now? Petroleum has closed. So which health center? That has gone out the window. So detriment number 3, energy security is compromised. So under Part 4, all assets of Petrotrin, Part 4 of this bill, Mr. Vice President, all assets of Petrotrin relative to the refinery operations are transferred to and vested in Guaracara refining, relative to a particular schedule. So the closure of the refinery that has translated to and has resulted in energy insecurity, and it has compromised our energy sovereignty. Now, what does that mean? The International Energy Agency defines energy security as an uninterrupted availability of energy sources at an affordable price. The Honorable Minister of Energy has come to the Parliament today to explain that they got a particular price for crude exported, okay, which is comparable to the benchmark crude we use in our budget allocations. However, what the Honourable Minister has not clarified as yet, and he's yet to contribute to this debate if he decides to, is what will be the bill for super, diesel, kerosene, regular gas, petroleum jelly, bitumen. I can go on and on. But this is not a class in fractional distillation, and I'm only qualified in chemistry up to CXC level. So the reality is, Mr. Vice President, is that energy security in Trinidad and Tobago was always assured because of the history we have had over 100 years in oil refining, in oil exploration, and thereafter in refining. But there are several questions that arise when one considers energy security and the approach taken in this bill. The first is, what is the mandate of the new man in charge of Heritage Petroleum as pertains taking over the reins of our national heritage? What is his mandate, given that he was appointed prior to the company even being incorporated? How will this new setup impact on contributions to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund? The Minister of Finance must answer. How? Because this same Petrotrin that we are beating today, has been the ones responsible for our national savings in the most part. And I'll say why I say that. We claim that we are a gas-based economy. But before gas, there was oil. We could not have reached gas if we did not have oil. You know what it's like, Mr. Vice President? It's like the families of old. The first one, they'll tell me, you go and be a laborer because we don't have enough money to send you to school. All right? The last one, or the one in the middle, he doing all right. You can get him to go to college, university, and so on. You will pave the way. You will earn and you will help establish the family. And when the child comes out from the university, he now looks down on the one who has been responsible for the ground that he stands on. So what we are doing in this country by this government's action is chastising the very institution that has been responsible for the development of this national savings and the entire rollout of our industrialization platform in Trinidad and Tobago. If that, Mr. Vice President, is not incompetence, it is wickedness. The third issue is that national crown jewels managed by foreigners being strategic assets impacts upon our proprietary knowledge. A key ingredient in TNT energy experts being seen as global authorities. There is a reason why the Association of Caribbean Energy Specialists can boast that among their members, they have advisors to ministers of energy across the continent of Africa, across the Caribbean space, and even, I dare say, to some institutes in Europe. So, Mr. Vice President, are we saying now that we are going to abdicate, we are going to give up on being an authority on oil and gas globally? Are we saying that there's no more Trinidad and Tobago model for exploitation of our natural gas and our oil and gas? So what is this new setup and what has been globally accepted as the Trinidad and Tobago model?
Honourable Senators, it is now 4:30 and time for tea. Senator Obika, you've spoken for 26 minutes. When we return, you have 14 minutes remaining. This House now stands suspended for tea until 5 p.m.